Hey friends, happy Sunday and welcome to another Sunday with Sarah. Today I'm here to talk to you about losing teeth. I'll discuss the developmental milestone it signifies when children start losing their baby teeth, and I'm going to talk about the tooth fairy and whether we're lying when we tell our children that there is a tooth fairy. And more practically, I'm going to share some ideas with you on how to celebrate each lost tooth with some creative tooth fairy ideas from a Waldorf perspective. If we haven't met before, I'm Sarah Baldwin. I'm the president of Bella Luna Toys, one of the oldest online resources for Waldorf toys and crafts online. In fact, this year, the company is now 20 years old. I'm also a trained and experienced Waldorf early childhood teacher and author and the mother of 2 grown Waldorf graduates. Now, if you happen to be the parent of a young child at a Waldorf school, you may have heard teachers talking a lot about the change of teeth and may have wondered why there's such an emphasis on teeth. Well, one reason is that Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Waldorf education, indicated that the change of teeth, that is, losing one's baby teeth and having the adult teeth emerge, is a marker of the transition from the first 7-year cycle of childhood, the early childhood years from birth to age 7, into the second cycle, the grade school years, ages 7 to 14. You can learn more about these 7-year cycles in my previous video called 7-Year Cycles, which I will link to in the notes below. Now, when assessing a child's readiness for first grade, one thing Waldorf teachers look for is whether the child has started losing teeth. According to Steiner, it's an indication that the energy or life force that has been used in the early years for forming the child's physical body is now being freed up for more academic and cognitive learning. Now, most children lose their first tooth on average around the age of 6, but this can vary in either direction by as much as a year. Now, I'm sure that you all have memories of discovering your first wiggly tooth and the excitement that accompanied that special day when you held your first lost tooth in your hand. And I'm guessing that most of you put your tooth under your pillow that night for the tooth fairy. While I think most parents choose to carry on the tooth fairy tradition with their own children, some parents question this practice and worry that they are lying to their children and not being truthful or honest. Well, I'm here today to tell you that you aren't lying. Young children live in a world of magic and make-believe, and by introducing the tradition of the tooth fairy, you're entering into a child's world of make-believe and their need to believe in magic. Under the age of 7, it's common for children to have imaginary friends, and as you know, fairy tales have captured the imaginations of children for centuries, and fairy tales are full of magic. Indeed, many experts believe that it's actually healthy for children to engage in the world of make-believe. Children need to believe in magic. One reason that the Harry Potter books became such a huge hit was because of this children's need to believe in magic, and they came after several decades in which children's literature was more reality and scientifically based and void of magic. Now, think back to your own childhood. Do you have fond memories of visits from the Tooth Fairy or from Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny? Chances are that you do, even though you now know who really put those gifts in your stocking or in your basket or under the pillow. Chances are that you still have a warm spot in your heart for these traditions and want to share those same traditions with your own children, and that is wonderful. So, are we lying? Well, I firmly believe that the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, the Tooth Fairy, they're all real. Truer than true, as I used to say to my children. because the universal truth behind such imaginary figures is the spirit of love, of generosity and giving. And this spirit is indeed alive and well, and truer than true. It's important to understand that the magic in fairy tales is deeply symbolic of spiritual truths. For instance, in the Grimm's fairy tales, good always overcomes evil. The pure of heart are always rewarded and the evildoers are punished. The magic in these stories may be imaginary, but the deeper symbolism behind the stories is truer than true. So now that you know that it's okay for a child to believe in the Tooth Fairy, I'm going to give you some creative ideas on making visits from the Tooth Fairy more magical. But before I do, if you're finding this video helpful, please be sure to like it and subscribe to the Sunday with Sarah YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you hit the little notification bell, you'll be notified every month when I post a new video. On the first Sunday of each month, I post new content on which I discuss parenting topics from a Waldorf perspective, such as child development, homeschooling, the power of play, as well as craft tutorials, songs, verses to share with children, and much more. And I'm also on Instagram Live weekly to answer your questions in real time. So if you don't already, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Bella Luna Toys to be notified when I'm live. Now, on to the creative Tooth Fairy ideas I promised. We know now that children need to believe in magic and that the Tooth Fairy is from a magical world, right? So how can we make the experience of the Tooth Fairy more magical for a child? Well, now we all know that the common tradition is for children to put their lost tooth under their pillow at bedtime and to wake up to find a shiny coin or crisp dollar bill under their pillow. But think about it. Does cash seem very fairy-like to you? Now ask yourself, what are the qualities of a fairy? What kind of magical gift from the fairy world would a real fairy leave? So I'd like to suggest that a small gift from nature or a small handmade item is much more magical than money. A gift from the Tooth Fairy could be a crystal or semi-precious stone like this. It could be a seashell or a handcrafted gnome, a little gnome like this, or a little wooden animal, these little Ostheimer animals, or it could be a little bracelet made of beads. But a beautiful, small, natural token makes a much more meaningful gift for a child, I would say, than a big, expensive toy or cash. Again, think about it. At the age of 6, most children haven't even learned yet about currency, the fractions or the value of a dollar. Money is still an abstract concept for them. All they know is that money is used to buy things. But a child is much more likely to treasure his first gift from the Tooth Fairy and keep it for years, maybe even until adulthood, long after the cash has been spent on who remembers what. And here's another idea. Having a special Tooth Fairy box or pouch allows a child to keep their tooth safe and secure under their pillow. Now this little wooden box, Tooth Fairy box, is from Bella Luna Toys. I think it's perfect. It will hold the child's tooth and is big enough for the Tooth Fairy to put little treasures inside like the ones I mentioned. It can be kept in a safe place, and every time a child loses another tooth, it can become part of your family's Tooth Fairy tradition. Now another idea is a bit more of a commitment, but it's one that I practice with my own 2 children. Now, it might sound daunting at first, but trust me, it can be a truly magical tradition for both parent and child. You can start a Tooth Fairy book with a new poem and drawing left for the child by the Tooth Fairy for each lost tooth. Now, as I was preparing for this video, I looked all over my house for the Tooth Fairy books I made for my kids to show you. But I learned that they are with my kids who are now grown and living out of state, not having time to wait for them in the mail. So I worked this week on recreating the first page of my son Harper's Tooth Fairy book. And the way it works is this. Find a small and pretty decorative book with blank pages. I found this one from Gecko, a company whose toys and children's products are designed in France. But on one side, the Tooth Fairy would leave a drawing made with colored pencils, and on the opposite side was a poem she had written. Now, I just happened to remember the first poem I wrote in Harper's book, and here it is. It says, "Hip, hip, hooray, Harper lost his first tooth today. All the fairies in fairyland are dancing with joy. That blue-eyed baby is now a big, strong boy." Now, I can just hear some of you saying, "But I'm not creative. I can't draw to save my life. I could never write a poem." Well, when I was a young mother, I told myself all those same lies. But when this tradition was first suggested to me by one of my classmates in Waldorf teacher training, it sounded so special and magical that I was inspired to try. Finding rhymes and writing a simple little poem, it's not as hard as you think, and with practice it gets easier. One tip is to write your tooth fairy poems in advance. When Harper lost his second tooth, it was about 11 p.m. and the tooth fairy was tired. Her creative juices just weren't flowing. She did get a poem written, but it gave her the experience to know to plan ahead. Now, if you're really stumped, I'll leave a couple of verses in the notes below this video that you're free to copy and use, but I really encourage you to try writing your own verses. It's simpler than you think, and it's so satisfying. And if you think you can't draw, I'm right there with you. I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't think I'm much of an artist, but I'm a good copycat. For my kids' tooth fairy books, I used illustrations from picture books as inspiration. For instance, for their original tooth fairy books, I used these Cicely Mary Barker books of flower fairies, and this little book is available from Bella Luna Toys. But it doesn't have to be pictures of fairies. It can be a tree, it can be a flower, a mushroom, an apple, moon and stars. It can be very simple. The most important thing is that it's a gift from your hands and your heart for your child, which is so special. For the recreation that I did of Harper's book, for this little book, I searched Google Images for fairy illustration and chose something that I thought I could recreate with colored pencils, and I simplified the original. But just like writing verses, the more you practice drawing, the better you will get, and you'll get to a point where you no longer feel like you have to copy someone else's artwork. You could practice drawing ahead of time between lost teeth in a separate notebook with colored pencils. Starting or maintaining a creative practice like drawing or writing your own verses, it's wonderful for one's self-development. It's calming, satisfying, and nourishing to the soul. I suggest that one night, instead of watching TV or a movie, take some regular time in the evenings when your kids are asleep to exercise your creative muscles by writing poems in advance and practicing drawing. So in our family, the tradition was the child would put his lost tooth in the tooth fairy box under his pillow. And when the child was fast asleep, the tooth fairy came, took the tooth, and left in its place a small treasure, like a crystal. And the first lost tooth, she left the tooth fairy book with the first poem and the first picture. And then after that, each lost tooth, the box and the book would go under their pillow. Now think back again to your old childhood. What would have made a more lasting memory, do you think? A little treasure in a poem or a coin? While it takes a little more planning, I think you and your children will find the effort worth it. And one final tip, collect tooth fairy treasures in advance and keep them well hidden until the time comes. Don't be left scrambling to find something at 11 p.m. like the tooth fairy in our house once did. Well, I hope that gives you some reassurance that keeping magic alive, however you choose to do it, is not only good for kids, it's good for everybody. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate the time you took to watch this video. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have a comment or question for me, please post in the comments below. I do my best to respond to every single comment, and I may even answer your question in a future video. So thanks again. See you next month. Bye-bye.